To battleground Newfoundland and Labrador now, where provincial Liberals in that province are in the midst of a campaign to pick a new leader. And just to remind you, the 2013 Newfoundland and Labrador Liberal race will be decided at a convention November 15th to 17th. Running in the race, interim leader Dwight Ball, and the other MHA, sitting MHA is Jim Bennett. Also running, former MHA, Danny Dumaresque, and a couple of business leaders in the province, Kathy Bennett and Paul Antle. Now, we're going to talk to federal Liberal MP Scott Sims. He's made a decision about who we'd like to see win this race. We're going to talk about that in a second. Scott, good to see you. But people were talking to you at one point about leading the provincial party. And you decided not to run at the end of the day, and thank God, because we like to see you here in Ottawa. But let me ask you about the state of the provincial party, because I'm sure as you were deciding whether or not to take on that challenge, you were thinking, well, what is the state of the provincial Liberal Party? The polls say right now it looks like your team is on the upswing. But how's it? It hasn't been a good few years for the provincial Liberals.
Well, no, it has not, because I think most of the conversation has been primarily around, well, Danny Williams was north of 80% in the polls. So how do you...
A force of nature.
A force of nature, indeed. And when he was battling with Stephen Harper on the ABC campaign, someone called it the irresistible force meets the immovable object. And as a result, as you know, Newfoundlanders, Labradorians, we love a good scrap, especially when it comes to politics. And therefore, what happened was, as a result, Danny went high in the polls, and every other party suffered as a result of that. Things have obviously changed. I think you may see a poll in the next little while that shows that the decline for the provincial Conservatives, progressive Conservatives, has gone even further down, and the Liberals are gone up. So I guess because of the race, or just, I guess, people shifting their intentions to vote.
Well, it seems Premier Dunderdale, Kathy Dunderdale, there's been polls out that says she's one of the least popular premiers in the whole country. Her personal popularity, she's obviously no Danny Williams and really just hasn't been able to capitalize on that. So the Liberals, right now, this race, and one of the reasons we're excited to cover it, is this could be the race to decide the next premier of the province, quite possibly. I mean, it's looking good for you guys. Now, tell us about the guy you're backing. It's someone who has not yet had elected office.
No, he's tried before. It's Paul Antle. I've known Paul for many years. Paul is an incredibly good businessman. He's got a lot of experience. Both in the private sector and not-for-profit sector, which also bodes well, because you know that dealing a lot with constituents in politics, you have to deal with a lot of people who volunteer their time for a good cause, and Paul certainly has over the years. His business acumen is something that I'm impressed with, because he has not only domestic business experience, but also international experience. And David, for me, you know, we are a province rich in natural resources. You can even say that a majority of our revenue comes from our natural resources. I mean, we're like jurisdictions like Alberta, Norway, and nowadays, if you look at it, natural resources, we're plugged into the world. And someone like Paul Antle is a good person, not only plugged in to managing the province within Canada, but he can also manage the province in the context internationally around the world. And that's the type of leadership that I think that, that Newfoundland and Labrador need. So that's why I'm supporting Paul, not to put down the others. This is a friendly race, of course, a family little squabble, if you want to call it that.
Sure. Well, but Dwight Ball surely has got to be one of the favorites going in, just because he's been the interim leader. And, you know, a lot of people say he's done a bit of... Interim leaders can be thankless jobs, as you know. Would you think that Dwight's going to be the chief challenge then for Paul?
At this point, yes. Well, there are basically two stages. The popular opinion is that there are three candidates out front. There's Kathy Bennett, Paul Antle, as well as Dwight Ball. And the two candidates are further back. That's
Danny
Dumaresque. Danny Dumaresque.
Yeah.
But the thing is, about this, David, is that it's a race where every member gets the vote. So it's hard to gauge right now who's got most people signed up and where they're voting. So because of this new system, all the voting is done up front. So basically, we're asking you sign up, you become a supporter. So when you vote, you have a first choice, second choice, third choice, all the way down to fourth. And what they're saying is, who is your first choice to be leader? And if that person is eliminated, who would you have as your second choice, if necessary? So if you look at a standard leadership convention, like say when Stéphane Dion, Bob Rae, Michael Ignatieff, there was momentum building towards Stéphane because one vote was taken and then everybody votes again. Vote taken, vote again. But in this process, what's different is that all the voting is done up front.
It's all done ahead of time, so you don't get the momentum on the convention floor. That's right.
That is correct. So it's harder to gain momentum if you feel momentum coming your way, because that process doesn't take place. It's confusing to explain, but essentially what you have is all your voting up front, and as a result, we're looking at 3 candidates who seem to be pulling in most of the supporters thus far. But without seeing a list of who signed up and where they came from, what their intentions are, it's a little difficult. But I would say the 3 front runners right now be Dwight Ball, Cathy Bennett, Paul Antle, and the 2 others. But I would say that Dwight Ball, yes, back to your first point, very commendable job. I mean, he came in when the Progressive Conservatives were in first place, the transitioning from Danny Williams to Kathy Dunderdale. And to say it's a thankless job is hard to do, especially when you're facing such a popular premier. Leader of the opposition for Danny Williams had one of the most difficult political jobs in the history of this country. But he did it, and and here he is now running into leadership, and he's no longer interim leader because he is a candidate.
There we are. Well, Scott Sims, let's have you back. This has got another few weeks to go before the sign-ups stop and the voting starts. I know you'll be watching it, and we will too. So thanks for helping us tonight.
Nice to see you in Toronto, David.